try to finish up Song of Songs today. We'll be starting in chapter 7. I'd just like to begin with a quick review of where we've been. Song of Songs, it's called that. It's kind of the greatest song. It's kind of like Lord of Lords or Kings of Kings. So out of the 105 songs Solomon wrote, this one is identified as being the best one. It's a romantic love story, a young girl from Shulam and Solomon. Most interpret it that way. It's a story about their courtship and their dating and marriage, and then some of their life after marriage. We see that the central theme here is love, the power of love. It's clear that God designed marriage, and this is an example of that, how we're supposed to live it out. And we see in this example and in our own lives, we're most successful when we follow God's rules for things. So, we talked about early on the Hebrew poetry tool of a chiasm, and the more I've read this book, the more symmetry I see, and it points towards those central verses there, 4:16 and 5:1. So I challenge you to invite you to look at that, because I think it's interesting as you read through. You can see how the verses are almost perfectly parallel to each other as they lead into those central verses. I think Song of Solomon really complements the Genesis account of creation and Adam and Eve and putting them in the garden. God said He created man, and man should leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they'll be one. And we see that poetically in Song of Songs. But we also see a lot of garden imagery, flowers and trees and fragrances and things like that. And that takes us back to the garden as we think about God's original design for marriage. And I think, the interpretation of this is, Solomon and his bride and their courtship, and what we learn a lot about marriages, and then we can apply it to our own relationships. But I think we can also apply it to our relationship with God, because He desires a relationship with us. And I think our earthly relationships are, what makes them successful, time and attention, and all of those things are the same things that make our relationship with God successful. And so we can look for parallels there to learn from. The rough outline of the book is their courtship is in chapters 1 and the first 5 verses of chapter 3. Their wedding was in 3 verse 6 through 5:1, and then after that, the rest of the Song of Songs is about their maturing marriage. So let's begin in chapter 7, verse 1. Solomon is speaking, and he says, "How beautiful your sandaled feet, O prince's daughter! Your graceful legs are like jewels, the work of an artist's hands. Your navel is round as goblet that never lacks blended wine. Your waist is a mound of wheat encircled by lilies. Your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are the pools of Heshbon by the gate of Bathrim. Your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon, looking toward Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel. Your hair is like royal tapestry. The king is held captive by its tresses. How beautiful you are, and how pleasing, my love, and your delights. Your stature is like that of a palm, and your breasts like clusters of fruit. I said, I will climb the palm tree, I will take hold of its fruit. May your breasts be like clusters of grape on the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine." So we've seen several examples of where they trade descriptions and affirmations of each other, and they're very poetic, but they're also very sensual when they describe each other. But at the end of chapter 6 we studied last week, there was a question. Why would you gaze on the Shulamite? Talking about the woman. And so it seems like he's answering that question here. And he lists all of the things that his answer to why you would gaze. Look how wonderful she is, and he gives all these examples. And it reminds us of his description on their wedding night when he described, he went down almost the same way and described her head, her eyes, her nose, her mouth, her breasts, her legs. What's different here, though, is that he seems to start at the feet and go from toe to head, in this case, instead of from head to toe, which I find interesting. And in verse 7, he says, your stature is like that of a palm tree. So maybe it's as if he's gazing at her, and like you would a tree, you would start at the base, work your way up to the trunk, and then see the canopy and the beautiful leaves and blooms and all of that. So or one commentator said he might have been kneeling in front of her as he was looking at her. So he saw the feet and then the head and all that. But anyway, he describes starting with her feet and then her legs. One commentator said, legs are a symbol for loyalty and strength. It's the foundation of your body. He goes in and talks about her navel and waist and breasts, much like he did before, and we've talked about those. But this time he gets to her neck and he says it's like an ivory tower. And that's a little bit different than what he said before. He talked about the shields that were around her neck before, like Solomon's tower. And the ivory here could be a symbol of purity. It's white, symbol of purity, but tower signifies strength and value. And then it says here her nose was a tower of Lebanon looking towards Damascus. So Damascus was in Assyria. That was a territory that was an enemy of the Israelites. So this tower facing that direction with a nose for it might have been his way of saying that she's not only beautiful, but she's looking out for him. She's protecting him and alert to invaders. She was guarding him and guarding their relationship. So it seems like this is not just a physical description of what he loved about how she looked. He was also digging into her character and what he meant, what she meant to him. Since they've been married now, he's obviously very physically attracted to her, and we see their courtship and they share their affirmations of each other. But now they've been married, and he repeats some of the same things, but he's starting to appreciate who she really is as a person and her character. He talks about her eyes being deep pools of water. He mentions Heshbon. This was a Levitical city where the priests lived, and so pools there were for purification. So he saw in her eyes purity and righteousness. And in addition, pools were a source of refreshment, water. And the areas he was talking about were kind of desert areas. So imagine a pool of water in a desert area was extremely valuable. And so he's saying that his wife is not only pure and righteous, which is a huge value to a man, especially a king at that time, but he was also saying his wife was a source of refreshment for him, a source of cleansing. He said her head was like a crown like Mount Carmel. And so you can imagine Carmel was one of the highest places around Jerusalem. And, we don't have that many high hills around here, but if you've ever driven to Colorado, it's amazing when you get into the Rockies and you see the towering mountains and how beautiful they are, especially when they're capped with snow. And so looking out of Jerusalem and seeing this Mount Carmel would have been awesome. It would have been something that was noticeable, and he's just thinking about her and how it was rising and how she rose above and how she stood out. And as a queen, she might have worn a crown for special occasions, but she is standing to be admired, and like a tree whose canopy is blossoming and blooming and stuff like that. She's, in his mind, standing out. And he talks about her hair. Before, y'all remember, he compared her hair to a bunch of goats descending a mountain. what does he say now? He says her hair is like royal tapestry. The king is held captive by his tresses. That's a little better than goats, right? That sounds more complimentary to me, this royal tapestry. And so you can imagine in the king's palace, royal tapestry might have been purple, deep purple, dark, and very elegantly adorned. And so she probably has long hair, and it's dark hair and beautiful. But overall, in verse 6 there, he says, how beautiful you are and how pleasing my love and your delight. Your stature is like that of the palm. So overall, she's very pleasing. She's a woman of great stature. She's a place of refuge and strength for him. And then he concludes this list of praises he says, I said, I will climb the palm tree. I will take hold of its fruit. May your breasts be like clusters of grape, the fragrances of your breath like apples, your mouth like the best of wine. So again, we see this powerful garden imagery. And it's very romantic. She was attractive to him, but she was also a source of satisfaction and nourishment and refuge. And so they were joined, they were one, they were physically one, they were emotionally one. And so this is a great description of what God intended marriage relationships to be like. He appreciated her. And so in the next verses, we see her response to his wonderful list of characteristics here. So let's continue reading in verse 9. It says, may the wine go straight to my beloved, flowing gently over lips and teeth. I belong to my beloved, and he is desirous for me. Come, my beloved, let us go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. Let us go early to the vineyards to see if the vines have budded, if their blossoms have opened, and if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes send out their fragrance, and at our door is every delicacy, both new and old, that I have stored up for you, my beloved. If only you were to me like a brother, who was nursed in my brother's breast, then if I found you outside, I would kiss you, and no one would despise me. I would lead you and bring you to my mother's house, she who has taught me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, the nectar of my pomegranates. His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. And so this seems to be her response to his list of descriptions. And one of the last things he says was, and your mouth like the best wine. And then she says, may the wine go straight to my beloved, flowing gently over their lips and teeth. So they're agreeing that they want to enjoy this. This seems like she's saying this is poetic language for sharing a kiss. And the kiss is intoxicating, like a glass of wine would be. And she then declares that she belongs to him and his desire is for her. And this is just her affirmation that she is his wife and they are one. And she not only acknowledges that, but she loves that and affirms that. And that they're united in marriage, two becoming one, and that is their desire for each other. She suggested they take a trip to the countryside, stay in the villages and walk in the vineyards. And we see in their dating relationship they did that a couple of times as well. So she acknowledged that in the first chapter she worked in a vineyard. And so she might have been a country girl growing up out there. And so these trips would have been nice for her to get away from Jerusalem, get out of the palace, go back to something she was familiar with, something closer to home. But we still see this imagery of vineyards, flowers, the fruit blooming. So these are metaphors for their relationship and how it's blossoming and blooming, and both emotionally and physically. And again, like I mentioned in the introduction, it takes us back to the Garden of Eden, where God created this beautiful garden. and all of its blossoms and fragrances, and we get to enjoy a portion of that when our springtime blooms. But this imagery here is a metaphor for their love, but it takes us back to God's creation there. She says something kind of odd, at least in our culture. She wishes that he was her brother so she could kiss him in public. And we don't maybe understand that. In their customs, they were very conservative, so only fathers and brothers could touch or show affection to a sister or a daughter. And so, as our schools call it, PDA, public displays of affection. You were not allowed to show that if you were a married couple. That was just taboo in their culture. But she was so attracted to him, she wanted to show him affection in public. And so her solution to that in her mind was, if you were my brother, then I could kiss you. But if he was her brother, that would cause other problems. So it's just a poetic way of saying, I'd love to be able to show affection to you in public. And then she repeats a wish that she had said earlier, to bring him to her mother's house. When you meet the right one, you want to take them home to meet mom and dad, don't you? You want your family to be plugged in and agreeable to that relationship. You want the support and encouragement of them. And so I think it's just her way of acknowledging that they are family, and that this union is correct and encouraged. She describes herself to him as spiced wine and the nectar of pomegranates, and then she gives this very intimate description of how he was holding her, with his arm behind her head and his other arm, left arm under her head, and his right arm embracing me. So this was a very intimate hug or embrace. And then she repeats her warning to the daughters of Jerusalem to not awaken love until the time is right. And she said this may be the third or fourth time she said that now. So she recognizes this power of love, and once it's awakened, it's really hard to put it to sleep again. So she's just really warning these girls that aren't married yet to be careful with that, and not stoking the fires of love way too early. And this is a good lesson for our teens and children, and I'm afraid the church doesn't, as we've talked about, doesn't do enough, I think, to teach the Song of Songs and to give teens another voice in what they hear in culture and from their peers. The church needs a louder voice in that, and I think these are great warnings that we should be teaching our teens. Continuing on in chapter 8, verse 5, the friends speak now. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaving on her beloved? And then she says, under the apple tree I roused you, there your mother conceived you. There she who was in labor gave birth. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned. So the friends speak here. So it sounds like they are observing the couple returning from their getaway. And then they ask this question, who is this coming up from the wilderness leaning on her beloved? So they were very close together in their ascent back to the city. And so she was physically wanting to be close to him, but I think there's also an emotional connection there that the friends probably observed. She says here she wanted to take him to her mother's house, but then she says here that they were at an apple tree where his mother gave birth to him. So if this is to be taken literally, maybe they actually visited both their parents on their getaway. Or it could be more figurative about involving family in their relationship and the support and the encouragement that we draw from our families. And me and my wife have kind of made it a habit to spend Sunday lunch with one of our parents, alternating as best we can through the years, ever since we've been dating. And that's our way of keeping in touch with family and staying plugged into that. And hopefully we've taught our children that that's what you're supposed to do on Sunday, so they'll do that with us when they have their own families and won't forget about us. But families are important, and she brought in both her mom and his mom into this discussion. Another meaning, one commentator says, was that his mother gave birth to him, and that he was created just for her. And so his mom giving birth was in effect for her benefit, because and so it's a great feeling to know, once you've found the one that God made for you, that everything just falls in place. And so she may have been commenting on that, that this was God's design for her, and she was enjoying that. She then talks about a seal on the arm and her being a seal. So for a king, a seal would have been a sign of authenticity, of ownership and authority. And so she wanted their relationship to be like that, a claim on each other, binding and authoritative. They were inseparably linked, and to the exclusion of all others. And so this was not only outward appearance, but inward feelings. She wanted him to be linked to her and her to him emotionally, but also to the point so powerfully that would keep people away. He wouldn't look at other women because he had her. And so this seal was in her mind intended to be very powerful. She then uses 4 metaphors to describe the power of love. The first is, she says it's as strong as death. And when I think about death, I think about the pain of the separation and the grief of the loss. That's powerful emotions, isn't it? And love has the same intensity sometimes. If it's a love that's gone bad, there's often pain there and it's powerful. If it's a love that's gone good, it's sometimes also intense, but opposite in a good way. And so death is a very powerful. One commentator said that death, once people die, death doesn't give up the people. So death has a stronghold on people, unless obviously miraculously people can be healed from the dead. But generally, once people die, they don't come back to life. And so love is like that. It's very powerful. Then it says jealousy, unyielding as the grave. And jealousy is an odd word sometimes. We often think about it as bad. I'm jealous of somebody because they have something I don't. And that's really envy, wanting something we don't have. One description I read of jealousy is actually wanting something that's yours. And the Bible describes God as having a jealous heart for us. He does not want us seeking other gods or having idols before Him. He's a jealous God, and that's not a bad thing. He wants our hearts devoted to Him. And so in a relationship, I think jealousy can be seen in a positive context where we want our spouse and we don't want anybody else to have our spouse. That's a natural emotion. And when that's violated, we see problems of that. But that's a natural thing, a healthy thing when it comes to an intimate relationship. Just like God is jealous for us, we should be jealous for our spouses. But when it crosses over into the unhealthy jealousy, when we're controlling or we limit who they contact with because we're insecure about things, then we pass the line of a healthy jealousy into something that's not good and not healthy in a relationship. But jealousy can have very good natural meanings here, especially when compared to God's jealousy for us. She goes on and talks about it's like blazing fire. So we certainly have examples in Texas now. Fires out of control, fires. We left for a baseball game Friday night and I thought our neighborhood was on fire because the fires at Fort Hood were blowing the smoke this way, and I thought I was going to have to stay home and protect the house, but because it was so dense with smoke and stuff, and we've been praying for and thinking about the people north of here that are dealing with the fires and the loss of homes and loss of life. And certainly we see the power of one spark that turns into a blaze that destroys many things. And so she says love is like that. Love is powerful, like a fire. And fires are destructive, and love can be that way sometimes if it's mishandled. Fires can be a good thing, though, too. We can warm ourselves, we can cook. When the electricity goes off and it's cold outside and freezing, the only warmth you may have is what you can burn in your fireplace. And so fires can be good, and love is like that. And so, it can be used for powerful good or it can be used for powerful bad. And, we have to be careful with that. She then goes on to compare love to rivers. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. So, rivers can be very powerful. We can see often the canyons they cut because of the rolling river. They can flood areas and do immense damage in their path. And so love, similarly, is powerful like that. But it's saying here, love can be strong. Love cannot be quenched. Love cannot be drowned or swept away. Love is an anchor in the turbulent waters of life. So we can think, as this world and its torrents and its currents try to sweep us away, the love and support of a spouse can really help us weather tough times. In fact, the tough times maybe even bring you closer together as you weather those storms, whether it be loss of family or loss of a job or things that come up. Love is an anchor in that. She goes on to talk about wealth as the fourth comparison with the power of love. And, just refer back, she says, if one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would utterly be scorned. So she's basically saying, you can't buy me love. Money can't buy love. All the money in the world cannot buy true love. It's not for sale. And, some people may choose money over love, thinking they'll be happy with that, and they often regret that decision. Those who choose love sometimes think about, did I do the right thing? But, I think they're saying here that, you need, if you did that, you were wise, because, there's no replacement for true love is invaluable. You can't put a price on it. And, it was good to read some of the thoughts on commentators. No job, no pursuit, no hobby, nothing is worth losing your marriage over because it's so valuable. And this past week we watched the movie Home Team on Netflix. It's about Sean Payton, head coach of the NFL team, the New Orleans Saints. He got suspended, so he moved home and he coached his son's football team. And it was a neat story of him, being with his family and all that, but it left a bad feeling with me. Even team did well, they got second place. He spent time with his son and all of that, but in the process, as I read the real story, sometimes the Hollywood versions don't follow real life events, so I like to go read what really happened. And during that time, he actually filed for divorce with his wife, And, the movie depicts the relationship between him and his kids was estranged. And so I could imagine that him moving away from their life in Dallas, he was assistant coach at Dallas before he went to New Orleans. They had a life there, so then he moved to New Orleans to take that job. And it was tough on the family being separated. And head coach's job is pretty intense, so he spent a lot of hours there. And so I just watched the movie. It was entertaining, but I just had this bad feeling that this NFL head coach lost his family because he pursued that job. And it just didn't seem worth it to me. Even though he went and won a Super Bowl and he's coached a Hall of Fame quarterback and all of that. And he may go into the Hall of Fame someday, but it just does not seem worth it to me. But unfortunately, it may be too late for him to realize that. So, God made love, and these 4 examples of the power of love. God made it, and it's powerful, and it's God's gift. And it's one of the greatest experiences that we can have in this life. And I think I mentioned this earlier as we were studying. We have a picture frame in our house, and it says the greatest happiness in life is to love and be loved. And as I've studied and reflected on this book of the Bible, the more and more that rings true in my life. So let's continue on quickly in the rest of chapter 8 here. It says, we have a little sister and her breasts are not yet grown. What shall we do for our sister on the day she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build towers of silver on her. If she is a door, we will enclose her with panels of cedar. And then she says, I am a wall and my breasts are like towers, thus I have become in the eyes like one bringing contentment. Solomon had a vineyard in Baal Hamon. He let out his vineyard to tenants. Each was to bring for its fruit 1,000 shekels of silver, but my own vineyard is mine to give. 1,000 shekels are for you, Solomon, and 200 are for those who tend its fruit. You dwell in the gardens with friends and attendants, let me hear your voice. Come away, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or like a young stag on the spice-laden mountains. So this little sister here, one interpretation said that was her brothers reflecting on their protection of her, and another was the friends talking about a little sister, and they're basically the wall that they're talking about is her chastity or virginity, and then Solomon's wife says, I was a wall, which means she saved herself. She was a virgin when they married, and that brings favor and honor and contentment to her husband. And she talks about the vineyards that Solomon had. So we seem to interpret Solomon's vineyards as literal, that he leased out. He had tenants. They paid him in fruit and silver. She had a vineyard, which is figuratively, metaphorically, her body. And she gave that to Solomon. Her vineyard was not for sale or lease. It was hers to give. She gave it freely to Solomon, and that was a priceless value. And then he calls out to her, and then she responds with this saying, come away, my beloved. And this kind of mirrors what we've seen in verse 4 of chapter 1. Take me away, let us hurry, let the king bring me into the chamber. So there's a lot of symmetry in this book, in the chiastic relationship as we talked about. So just real quickly, I wanted to summarize and talk about the applications of this. So we've seen this marriage relationship. I think this is a sign that we have a God. I've talked about, multiple things that point to God, creation, the solar system and how it's a perfect time clock, the human body and how intricate it is. As I've studied this, I've just been in awe at how God has created relationships, and it's a gift from Him. It's by His design, and it's amazing when you think about everything that goes into that. And we have to think about it. It's spiritual, it's emotional, it's physical. We're three parts: mind, body, spirit. And so we have to think about relationships in that context. The physical is easy; it comes naturally. The emotional is more challenging. We have to work at that. We have to be intentional. We have to take time. We have to battle priorities and busyness to spend time with one another. We have to seek one another, as we studied last week when they had a disagreement. And the vows we took to love, honor, and cherish, those are verbs. Verbs require action. And so I think that's one lesson we can take away from this, is that, we're physical, that's easy. We're emotional, that's hard. we have to fight for that. And we have to guard against all these things that come against us, the busyness. It's easy to focus on the kids. Sin can sneak into our lives if we don't go on guard. Getting hung up on things like outward appearance rather than true inner beauty. Forgetting things, being lazy, prioritizing work over family, or consuming too much social media or television. All these things can get into a relationship and become, sand in the gears where it just quits turning like it should. But then we can't leave out the spiritual component either. We're mind, body, spirit, and we have to connect on all three levels. And so marriages will be most successful when we do the physical, the emotional, but also the spiritual. So we have to seek God. And I use this illustration early on. Think of life as like running a track meet, running around the track. And the track is our personal relationship with Jesus. The goal is to be more like Him, to get to Him. And as we run, we have people that run along beside us. And the goal is not to find a mate. The goal is to find God and be like God. And then as somebody runs along beside us, we have a helper. We have a mate. And it's important that mate be there running along beside us with the same pace, with the same goals. If the pace is different, if the goal is different, then it's very hard to mature together spiritually as a couple. And so so we see that this human love is better than anything in the world except one thing, and that's God's love for us and our relationship with God. And that's an important application we can take from this. So as we work to strengthen our marriage relationships, we can think about strengthening our relationship with God. So all them things that I listed that come between us and our mates, they come between us and God too. And so He wants us to be in a relationship with Him. He seeks us. He's waiting. And we should want to be in His presence. We should prioritize spending time with Him, and we should respect Him enough to obey His commandments. And so these are the applications we can take away from this book, and not only improve our relationship with our spouses, but also improve our relationship with our Heavenly Father, which is the most important relationship we should have in this life.